I think it's that thing where that's partly, that's one of the positives that's come out of the pandemic. Everybody now has access to their computers and they're used to Zooming. Online communities are thriving. And it's interesting because I always had a vision for Big Mouth Voices because I love people. I love connecting with people. That's what's been great about film sets. That's a whole community within itself. So, the connection that we all have when we're doing Lord of the Rings, or the connection that I have with my family, or the connection I have with my friends. And then Big Mouth Voices is part of that because I have such a love of bringing people together.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak.
We only have so many
the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supplies.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
One expert says a second
get away from all of these
We all
people.
need some good news.
A message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand. We're gonna make it.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Holling. The guest joining me today is literally doing so from the future, in that she is in a part of the world where it is already tomorrow. Sarah McLeod is a woman with extensive experience working in the film and television industry for over 20 years as an actress, voiceover artist, teacher, producer, and now agent. Known to many as the Hobbit Rosie Cotton, who married Samwise Gamgee, played by Sean Astin in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, and has appeared in many other notable acting roles. As a side note, her daughter Maisie played Rosie and Sam's son in the first of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. After seeing a need for an online voiceover booking system, Sarah founded and has been at the helm of Big Mouth Voices since 2011. Her strength lies in her vision for the voiceover industry and the ability to make things happen. With a team of innovators, Sarah is taking Big Mouth Voices into a new era, both within New Zealand and globally. She maintains the integrity of being an agency with great voices, efficient service, a bit of fun, and a roster that includes some of the largest number of voice artists in Australasia. I'd like to give a warm U.S. welcome to my guest in the Southern Hemisphere, Sarah McLeod. Welcome to 19 Stories.
Thank you very much. It is lovely to be here.
It is lovely to have you. We have been trying for some time, so I really appreciate you taking the time to connect with me and delighted that we're finally able to do so. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. And yes, you are correct. It is hard to tie me down. I always have lots on the go. Currently here in New Zealand, here in Auckland particularly, unfortunately, we are in a 3-day lockdown. But it's not so much to do with a surge in cases. It's just to do with the quick, definitive action that Jacinda Ardern takes at the slightest peak of anything that could be a risk. It's like, lock that down straight away. But we're okay with that because we do believe it's what's keeping New Zealand safe. And I am very thankful to be living in New Zealand at this time with all that's going on in the world.
Let's begin by applauding the fact that your country was one of the few countries to handle the eradication of the virus in such an exemplary way, and that your Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
And she announced this past Saturday, February 13th, that you will be rolling out your supply of vaccinations this week, starting with frontline workers, which is fantastic. And I did hear last night that due to 3 members of a family in Auckland being testing positive for the coronavirus, that your city is in lockdown and that the entire country is on high alert. So I'm curious what lockdown means for you, as it is certainly different from country to country and definitely different than what it is here in the United States.
Yes. So, for example, we have been at level 1, and that means that schools are open, everything's open. Like, it's kind of like normal, other than the fact that masks are compulsory on public transport and we are encouraged to sign in with the COVID Tracer app. So until midnight on Sunday, life kind of was feeling like normal. Then with level 3, so we've got 4 levels here in New Zealand. Level 3 means everybody other than essential workers has to work from home. The schools all close other than to the children of essential workers. And the only things that are open are doctors, chemists, and any business or any food place that can do contactless delivery.
And does that mean that you can only receive food via delivery, or can you go out and actually shop at a store?
So you can go to a supermarket, but all the restaurants and the cafes are closed.
Which is why you've done such a great job in your country. In fact, many times I have said that it might be time to relocate to New Zealand, and I'm reminded over and over again that we can't come across your borders, and rightfully so.
Yeah, because and I think that's the thing. Like, what also needs to be commended is every New Zealander that's really respectful of the rules. We just don't really flout the rules on the whole. 3 cases in one family, and all of Auckland shuts down. But we just accept it. We're like, okay, that's the way it has to be. We all talk about go hard, go early, and we saw the results of that. So hopefully this will only be 3 days, and it's just so that the experts can ascertain what is the spread. Is there any community transmission, or is it just contained to this one family?
Well, that was going to be another question in that, obviously, in order to be so ahead of the game on it, that it would seem like everybody would have to be on the same page. Whereas here in the United States, it would be really interesting to hear kind of your perspective of viewing at the states, because I can tell you not only from county to county, or state to state, but certainly from county to county, it's so different. It's kind of like the Wild West. Some people believe it's a hoax, and they're just not going to go. It's just not something that they're going to adhere to. And other people, depending on what their communities and how their communities have been affected, are absolutely adhering to it. So is there a general perspective of how your country is viewing the U.S. at this time? Hey, I asked you the question. Feel free to speak.
We worry about the US.
I do too, trust me.
But we also worry about it in the context of, it's a very powerful, the US is a very powerful nation. And when things are going awry in the US, it does have a follow-on effect for, the rest of the world. So we do worry when we see the state of some things that are happening in the US. But, also we're lucky here in New Zealand because we're such a small population and we're so isolated. So we've still got people here that think the virus is a conspiracy and it's a hoax and it doesn't really exist. We'll still have people that will adamantly refuse to get a vaccination. But because they are a minority, it's a small minority here in New Zealand. Whereas I think, in the US, any group is so much more larger and has so much more of an impact just by virtue of the fact that you've got such a large population.
Yeah, that we're so large. Sure.
It's always headlining the news, what's happening in the US. So we're very much aware of what happens in the States. We follow it keenly as to sort of what's happening.
So I have a question regarding the term down under, because I know it's been used to refer to both Australia and New Zealand. However, in doing some research for our time together, I read that it is actually viewed as a derogatory term, or frowned on by some. And curious if you have any thoughts about that either way.
I definitely don't think of it as a derogatory term. It's a recognised term as like we're from down under. I kind of feel like it's a colloquial phrase of warmth rather than anything derogatory about it. I would normally use the term Australasia more than down under. So like, for example, in the business sense, if I'm talking about the kind of voices that I represent at Big Mouth Voices, it'll be, I represent the Australasian market rather than the down under market.
Because it encompasses more.
Well, I guess it's just because in the business sense, Australasia is more business, whereas down under is more colloquial.
Got it. And I've always viewed it as a term of endearment as well. But it was interesting to come across that because there's always new information and differing opinions, I guess, depending on your experience. And I read about where you first called your voices from, and I'm not familiar with what 95 BFM is.
Oh, okay. So that was back in the day long before I was with Big Mouth. I was the owner of Big Mouth, or even long before I was even a voiceover artist with Big Mouth, because that's how I started. I started as a voiceover artist with Big Mouth. But it all started with Yvonne Dudman in 1996, getting the voiceover artists from 99 BFM, which was the university radio station. So as you can imagine, it was the alternative voiceover artists. And it was created back in the day when, so much of radio advertising was the traditional radio disc jockeys with their real radio voices doing a radio ad.
Yeah.
and the BFM guys would be like, hey, dude, yeah, well, here we are and we've got the chickens in the backyard and, we're going to do a voiceover now because, we're different. So that's kind of how it started.
Is it safe to say it's public radio then, very similar to the States, because it's part of a university, so you don't have that hard commercial edge?
So BFM, definitely. It was alternative, the alternative music, student radio, basically. I don't know if you have, I don't know if the colleges over in the States have.
Oh, yeah. That's where I started. So that's why I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. And so that's just basically how it started. And it then became, so it had the reputation of being the quirky voices, the non-radio voices. Before that was popular, like now that is kind of what's very popular.
Conversational.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's how it started. And then it was bought by Ian Hughes, who had it and nurtured it, I think maybe for about 10 years. And during that time, I joined the books as a voiceover artist. And then he offered me the opportunity to help him. And then a month later, I then discovered it was a trial period because he wanted to sell his baby, but he wanted to sell it to someone good. And he decided I'd passed muster. And he then asked me if I'd like to buy the business. So I kind of was like, oh my God, I've never owned a business before in my life, but sure, I'll take that on. And then out of integrity, I decided not to be a voiceover artist on the books anymore and focus on being an agent. And that's how the Big Mouth Voices story started.
In thinking about your rich history, I was thinking about how did you go from being in one of the biggest movie franchises into transitioning to voiceover and then being an agent? So you just answered that question. And I understand that both of your daughters, Maisie and Lola, are in the business, with Maisie, as we mentioned at the opening, appearing in Lord of the Rings as your son. Because, of course, babies can be, they're kind of asexual at that point, right? She's a freelance photographer and booking agent for Big Mouth right now. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, actually, I've been a bit of a hobbit and I actually now have 4 daughters.
Oh, all right.
But Maisie is, so she's 21 and she's got a company called Castor and Pollux, and she works in freelancing in the film industry and help, and then as a booking agent for Big Mouth Voices when she's not on set doing videography or photography. And then Lola is 18 and she's at Victoria University in Wellington studying psychology. And then I now have 2 little ones. So Amelie is 8 and Nina is 6, and they both do voiceovers.
Oh, how fantastic. I really didn't know that. Like I said, just doing a little bit of homework on you, I came across Maisie and Lola, who, by the way, are quite stunning. They look just like Mama. Very, very beautiful young women. And I did not know that you had little hobbits running around. So that just even adds more to your plate of, I don't understand why we haven't talked up until now. I mean, really, Sarah.
I know, it's been too long, Cheryl.
Well, it was really delightful. The one time I've had a face-to-face with you is, I guess for full disclosure, I'm on your roster.
Yes.
With Big Mouth, and you had a wonderful introduction. It was a chance for you to bring your entire roster together from the UK and Australia and New Zealand and the States for us to get to know one another and certainly hear about your plans for the agency moving forward in this year. And it was my first time really having a chance to meet you or any of the agency mates. So that was really delightful. Appreciate you doing that.
I think it's that thing where that's partly, that's one of the positives that's come out of the pandemic. Everybody now has access to their computers and they're used to Zooming. Online communities are thriving. And it's interesting because I always had a vision for Big Mouth Voices because I love people. I love connecting with people. That's what's been great about film sets. That's a whole community within itself. So, the connection that we all have when we're doing Lord of the Rings, or the connection that I have with my family, or the connection I have with my friends. And then Big Mouth Voices is part of that because I have such a love of bringing people together. So that Zoom call, I was so happy to have so many people from around the world, and we can all add something to each other's days or each other's lives, I think, by connecting in that way. So thank you very much for being there because I got a thrill out of it as well.
It's interesting. As much as we slam technology as, consuming our lives, and I think it's with anything, we can let it consume us or we can use it to our advantage in a positive way.
Mm.
There have been so many connections, I think, that would not have happened. I mean, when would I have seen you face to face unless I physically came for a visit, which I would love to at some point.
Definitely.
It's connected us in ways, and I'm sure there's some people who go, oh, please, not another Zoom meeting. But I actually love it because hello, Poochie.
Yes.
What kind of Poochie do you have?
He's actually not come inside yet. Can you hear him? Did you hear him just do a little bit of a bark?
Yeah, it's okay. No. He's like, hey, you know what? Bring the family. It's okay.
He's actually outside the locked door, and I'm like, Rusty, boy, I'm in a meeting.
He's like, yeah, but you're talking to Cheryl. She's in the States.
Oh, yeah, there he goes again. I'll just go and open the door and let him in so he can say hello. Just a moment.
Yeah, that's fine. No worries. No worries.
I have now had to open the door to outside, so the cicadas might be a bit louder now.
That's another thing that's so wonderful about this time is people are so much more forgiving about things that would never have happened in business, like hearing Rusty. There's a news program that I watch daily, and the reporters, because of COVID, are reporting from home, of course, when they're not in the field, but most of the time they're doing their recap from home. And we've gotten to, the audience has gotten to know all of their animals. Sometimes they upstage the entire thing. You see the cats cleaning themselves or at the foot of the reporter meowing, wanting to be picked up or walking across their screen. I mean, it's, in ways you would never see that, never act with children and pets, right? Because they just upstage you all the time.
Yeah, totally.
So what kind of dog is Rusty anyway?
I have lots of animals. So Rusty is a golden retriever and he's 10. So he's lovely and mellow these days, which is good. And then I have 3 cats, Valentine, Bella and Puffin. And we also foster kittens from the SPCA.
It sounds delightful. I live in a place, there's really not a space for a cat, but I would love to have one. So curious, Sarah, if there are times when you find or have found yourself up against fear during COVID, because, again, your country has handled it so exemplary, but are there times you're fearful? And if so, what skill sets have you learned to help you combat it?
I totally freaked out when we first found out about it. And when we first went into lockdown, I was shattered. I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it. So I definitely had probably a week of thinking, what the heck has just happened? I was really worried about this business that I'd built up. I had images of it just, disseminated. I can't even think of the word.
Dissolved.
I had disseminated. Like, what's that? Is it disseminated? Like when it actually just explodes. I had images of, everything just falling apart. What did I do? So I am very knowledgeable about lots of things that one should do. And after about a week, I thought I should start doing some of these things. So I have to say I have that wonderful app, Calm, and I do a daily Calm. My husband and I often, we sort of first thing in the morning when we'd wake up, we'd actually put a daily Calm on. I try to do exercise, but I feel like I did more of the COVID kg gain than the COVID kg loss.
Oh, I think we all did the quarantine 15, girlfriend. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But also I have a really lovely, my house, we're out in West Auckland, so I am surrounded by greenery. I'm not in the middle of the bush, but I'm surrounded by greenery. My animals, just patting the cat, patting the dog, cuddling my children. We did lots and lots of awesome family time.
Beautiful.
So I think for me, that was a real positive that came out of lockdown. We watched all the Star Wars trilogies, the Harry Potter trilogies, and the Lord of the Rings trilogies, or the trilogies, the whole series. Sure. So we did all of them. And I think it's just that for me, because even I am really, really busy and I do have a tendency towards anxiety and getting stressed quite easily. So my husband will attest to that, as probably will my children. So I think for me, daily practice of mindfulness and quiet time with cuddles with the family, I think are really important.
I think that's what this time has also brought about too, is for people to connect more, maybe some more than others, because, if you really are, if you've gone from having an incredibly busy life and never being together to all of a sudden kind of forced to be together, it can be either a really positive, wonderful, welcome thing or not. But it sounds like in your case, it definitely was. And I'm curious, I had read, and because it was posted on April 1st or April Fool's Day a couple of years ago, that there was going to be like a half-hour reprise or something based around the pub.
Oh, the Green Dragon?
Yes, and that you were going to be part of that. Now, was that an April Fool's post, or was that something that actually happened?
I didn't see the post, but I know that for International Hobbits Day, not last year, but the year before, I indeed was back at the Green Dragon for the whole evening, serving drinks, dressed up as Rosie Cotton.
That's okay. That's what that picture, I did see another picture online somewhere that had you in full costume at the pub. So how fantastic. Now that is an actual pub now.
Yeah.
The movie was converted into a big tourist attraction.
It is amazing. So initially, obviously filming in Hobbiton was amazing. And then for a while there, it wasn't sort of recreated as a tourist destination, but then it became this tourist destination, and they have done such a magnificent job that even for me to go back there invokes these incredible feelings of like, oh, I'm back at the Green Dragon, or I'm back on Bagshot Row.
How fantastic. And I'm sure you were a massive celebrity of the day. Yes.
Well, it was fun because I think initially it wasn't really advertised. It was just that there was going to be a mystery guest. And I decided to make the effort to put on a costume, because normally when I go to fan events or anything like that, I don't dress up as Rosie Cotton. I just am there as Sarah McLeod. But I just thought for this particular one, it felt appropriate to don the Rosie Cotton attire. And I'm really pleased that I did. So so there I was, and suddenly all these people are like, hang on, what? Really?
You're her?
And that's what I love about, obviously the films are 20 years old now, but
Wait, that's right. Of course. 2001 was the first. 2003 was the second of the trilogy. And I don't have the date for the third, but yes, when you said it, 20 years, how is that possible? That's crazy.
Yeah, because they're doing I just had an interview for the Empire magazine. They're doing an item on 20 years of, I think, both Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Both are having 20-year anniversaries this year. So yes.
But we're not older,
No,
Sarah.
well, I tell you what, that's what freaks me out whenever I see anybody. I'm like secretly thinking, I need to pull my hat down because I'm 20 years older. Do they really recognize me still as Rosie Cotton, or are they going to get a shock?
Rosie does grow up. I think it's time for another trilogy. There you go. It's just
that's amazing.
Or the prequel.
That's what Maisie says. She's like, I'm sure they need to do another film now.
Then again, she has to explain how she went through a transition from being a boy to a girl. So curious if you have a particular faith to help you through this time.
I do actually. So I am a Buddhist. I am I practice Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, which actually is what Orlando Bloom also is a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist, and Tina Turner also actually. It's not so much a religion as a philosophy, but it does have a daily practice of Buddhist chanting.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love the philosophy of the practice, whereby it is about, in every moment, acting with those words that I shared with you earlier, like wisdom, courage, and compassion. And I find that that's a really lovely, it's just a nice line to follow. So in any moment, in regards to thoughts, words, and actions, I can just pause and think, okay, what's the wisest thing to do right now? If I need to act with courage, I'll bring that from within myself, but having huge compassion at all times for all others, as well as for myself. So I find that that's a nice practice that I have connected with.
So is that what you do to take care of yourself? You pull on those resources and say, this is how I can maybe take the 10th breath and take care of myself during a moment of, because you mentioned that chaos and stress. And that maybe what brings you back to your center so that you can be calm in the midst of a storm, so to speak.
Yes, because inherently I generally feel very strong within myself. And there was one image and that was shared in a story with me that I've always really held strong to. So it was imagining myself as bamboo and having these periods of growth where the growth is fast, but then in the tumultuous times, there's not as much growth, but it's what creates the bands in the bamboo, where there's the thickness within the stick of bamboo, and that's what creates the strength. And then there's a period of massive growth again, and then there'll be another period of slow growth where that another band is built, and that's what enables bamboo to be the strongest sort of branch, I think, is the idea that it's the strongest branch that's out there. And I love that imagery of periods of growth and then periods of struggle, but it's the struggle that makes us strong.
Absolutely. And what a beautiful metaphor, because it is the struggle that makes us strong. I also lived in a place with bamboo, and it is tenacious and it is
Yeah.
strong. And you
Yeah.
think you got it, you trim it back, and all of a sudden you look out, and it's like Jack and the Beanstalk. You have this ginormous, huge piece of bamboo growing in front of your window, and you're like, where did that come from? So I
Yeah.
appreciate that visualization. And with all the wonderful experiences and success you've had, and when we hear stories of people who've been successful and had a full life, we tend to think that it's been easy, or there hasn't been moments of resistance, or maybe, pulling back so that you can grow again into your new direction or venture. Can you tell us a time or experience where you had a fail, whether it's something within your career or definitely not personally, but maybe, a professional fail where that actually put you in a new direction, or it made you stronger to go more fully into the direction you were going in?
Gosh, that's actually a really hard question. And I think I find it a hard question because I actually don't think of failures. I think my mindset is that I don't regret anything because everything's always a learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually find it a little bit hard to think of failures that I may have had. I definitely know that I've had them, but either I've forgotten about them or I've transitioned them into being something else in my mind. I think if we talk about it in the context of Big Mouth Voices, failures for me have been because I'm very sensitive. I'm a very, very sensitive person. So I definitely take things very, very personally, whether it's a producer who's got pissed off with me, or I've messed up the time that a voiceover is meant to turn up at a studio, or a voiceover artist leaves the books for whatever reason. I take them, I guess, very personally as failures of me. But what I have done to address that is develop thicker skin, and not in a bad way, not in a callous, not caring way, but just as a way of learning that I don't have control over everything. I guess it's bringing in that compassion. Like if a producer goes off at me because they're having it might just be that they've got something else going on. They might have 6 jobs that they're juggling and they are actually quite stressed. So rather than me being, the failure would be me going within myself and going, oh my God, what have I done? Oh my God, oh my gosh, I've done something really bad here, and I could feel stink for a very long time. Instead, I will be like, okay, take a breath, have compassion for that person, think about what might be going on for that person. I might cry for 15 minutes and then I'll try and move on.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. And when I ask that question, and I just actually started asking that question. And the reason I do is because I've reframed failure myself. You and I, sounds like we're kind of cut from a similar rug, because I take things very personal. If I disappoint someone or someone's mad, I first all of a sudden go to myself, when in fact, many times it has nothing to do with me. It just has to do with what's on their plate, what someone else is going through, the stresses they're under. And certainly this time, wow, has hopefully taught all of us that, right? Because we never know what someone have they lost someone to COVID? Do they have someone in their family just diagnosed? Were they just diagnosed? The myriad of things that have come up during this time. But when I've started asking that question, there are some things that have been failures for people, but actually ended up being a blessing, because it turns out the information they needed to know to progress in whatever direction they're going in was provided through their attempt in learning. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Well, I think what I also want to say, because I don't know how many listeners you have on your podcasts, but
I have 2, me and you, Sarah.
No, but when it's out there, Cheryl, when it's out there in the universe, like I know we're not live right now, but when we have people listening, it's just that thing of, there's so much pressure on humanity and those that are connected to social media to keep thinking that everybody else's life is great, or everybody else is doing so well. And I can almost feel myself like wanting to cry as I say this, that life at times can be really hard. And even listening to this right now, if you're sort of like in a really hard space and you feel like there's an eternity ahead of you before that's going to be resolved. Just go so easy on yourself, because life can be really hard and it can be a long journey to find that path towards healing and resolution. And we've just got to have faith that there can be a positive outcome with whatever situation anyone is in, and to be so kind to yourself as you're going along that path. Because I've definitely had times when I have been at the bottom of the bottom in terms of like depths of despair or lots of anxiety, and I have so much on my plate, and even like, at times I will talk to a psychologist because I truly believe in, getting help where we can and getting help from professionals. And I would say to her, do you have other people that have so much crap happening in their lives? And she would say to me, Sarah, you have a very full life. And that always resonated with me, that I might have a lot happen, but it's because I take on a lot and I have a very full life. And therefore I choose to celebrate the fullness of it in its beauty and in its hardness.
That's beautifully stated. Absolutely. And gosh, the lesson in social media is that whole comparison thing. And, because we can project whatever we want on social media. And as I don't know what I was referring to before, but using things to your advantage, to how they work for you. And if they don't work, finding a way to let go of that fear of missing out, of comparing yourself, or you have to live up to X, Y, and Z. And truth be told, even those that are, displaying the most beautiful pages and the most beautiful life. And yes, they might be influencers, they might be very successful, but we can't for a moment think that they don't, put on their pants the same way, all the things that we can ascribe to just being human, they're feeling too. They just don't let us know that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we all keep remembering that.
So what brings you joy?
Oh, definitely my children, my husband, my animals, sunshine, flowers, the water. I love being in the water.
Yeah, me too.
Gentle music, solitude brings me a lot of joy.
Well, certainly with all that's on your plate.
Lying in a comfortable bed in the morning, having a cup of tea, reading a good book. I grew up by the beach, so Whangamata, which is about 2 hours just sort of southeast of Auckland. I love being in the waves, so I love going to the beach. At Christmas time, we go camping at a place called Tawharanui in a tent with no power.
Oh, I love it.
It's the best way to have Christmas. We make pancakes.
You do that every year?
We've done it for the last 2 years, and I've really, really enjoyed
beautiful.
it.
Beautiful.
It's just pancakes cooked on the gas stove, whipped cream out of the canister that we have in a chili bin with salt ice that lasts, the ice sort of lasts for about 4 days. It's just simplicity. I think simplicity brings me joy, and it's something that I try to find within the chaos of our world, those moments of simplicity. Smells. I love my essential oils, actually. That's another thing that brings me joy. Growing plants and smelling essential oils.
Now, do you grow your own plants to make your own oils, or do you source them elsewhere?
That may well be in my retirement plan if I ever retire. But no, I'm also very happy to find convenience in as many places as possible. So I buy my essential oils online.
I was going to say, if you're making your own essential oils on top of everything else, no wonder you need to go be in a tent for Christmas. Although that sounds absolutely divine. It's really interesting you say that, because I was going through my camping stuff last night. We're trying to purge some things, and my husband hasn't been much of a camper, and I have. And I was just thinking, I so miss being out in the woods and just sleeping in a sleeping bag under the stars and all the things that go along with camping. But you did say something that I want. Oh, your husband's name. We've talked about your children and your pets' names. What is your husband's name?
I don't particularly like my husband's name. It's Brent, but I call him River because, as we know, relationships have their challenges, and I love calling him River because it helps me connect with the flow of relationships and the effort that we need to all put into making them be the best that they can possibly be. So he's my river.
That's actually quite lovely. But Brent, I like your name. It's okay. I'm not married to you.
Don't listen to this, Brent. It actually means, I think it actually means hill, or the top of a hill or something.
What does Brent?
Brent, yeah, there's a...
I've never heard that.
We've Googled it before. Brent, yeah, it means something probably way back in like Irish times or something. But he's also, his surname is Goldsack. So he's got a very interesting name. And that's probably why you didn't know about Amelie and Nina, because their surname is Goldsack. Amelie Goldsack. You can find her on the Big Mouth website. She's got a beautiful, like endearing, very sweet voice.
I will do that. That's fun. And anybody else listening in the States who wants to cast from Big Mouth and cast Emily and anyone.
Amelie.
Oh, Amelie,
It's French.
as in the beautiful film.
Exactly, because I speak French and I want to live in France one day. So I decided to name her Amelie, so that when I'm living in France, which was meant to be this year, but obviously now won't be, that she would have a French name that would make her fit in well in the French classroom.
No, are you really going to move to France?
I have always loved France, and I've been there a few times, and I lived there for 4 months when I was 16. And Brent was teaching, he was the principal of a school in Munich when we first met. So he speaks German, I speak French, and I love the idea of just living with the girls for a period of time in Europe. Because when I was 9, I lived in Singapore for 3 years with my dad and mum, because dad was a teacher. So for me, I felt like those formative 3 years of living in Asia were wonderful for my development. And I kind of wanted to always add that to Amelie and Nina's lives. So sort of been a plan to spend some time in Europe, but we just don't know if and when that will now happen.
There's nothing like travel to open up your heart and your mind and embrace really life in all its colors and cultures. I certainly would love to travel more, and I would hope that you don't move to France before I can come visit you in New Zealand.
Right, we'll plan that, Cheryl. So I'll make sure I'm here before I leave.
Or I'll find you in France and use the one phrase. When I was going to acting school in New York City one summer ages ago, I worked part-time this is long before underground cables and phone service opened up to Europe without having to go through international operator. But I worked for a company called France Telecom, and they were building the first underwater cables to provide international communications again without going through an operator. And I was their receptionist. Everybody in the company spoke French except me. All the customers spoke French. Some of them spoke English. And I learned to say, je ne parle pas français. They're like, oh, so you say you can't speak French, therefore you must speak French. And they would start speaking to me in French. And I'm like, no, I don't speak French.
just that one sentence.
Just the one sentence. That and brie and croissant and omelette de fromage. But there you go.
Très bien.
So... Is there something you wish folks were mindful of right now as it relates to this time for how we can care or nurture each other?
I definitely think kindness and compassion just needs to be at the forefront of everybody's mind. We're living in such a heightened state. The world is in a state of chaos and fear. And with that comes up a magnification of sometimes the negative thoughts and the negative energy that people have. Everybody, we just have to be calm, kind, foremost to ourselves, so we then have the energy to be kind to others. And just everybody, every day, breathe in and breathe out love to the world. 10 breaths at the beginning of every day.
It's interesting you say 10, because my new mantra is to take the 10th breath before I react to something. And I found that's really helped me, because I can be pretty high charged, especially when I'm dealing with changing cell phone carriers like I was this morning.
That's the same worldwide.
I think it is. Oh my gosh. I didn't think I had serial killer inside of me, but let me tell you, get on the 27th call with Verizon. Anyway, I digress. What makes you hopeful?
I mean, humanity makes me hopeful. Inherently, I like to believe that humans have the capability to be kind to one another. I'm hopeful for a peaceful planet. I'm hopeful for effort against climate change. I'm hopeful for individuals to be happy. I'm hopeful for families to resolve anything that they need to resolve and be happy and able to connect. I'm hopeful for the ongoing connection of governments. I'm hopeful for capitalism to not be at the forefront of every large industry's mind. I'm hopeful for generosity amongst those that are well off, and that those that aren't so well off are able to receive that. I'm hopeful for equality.
Would you like to come run in the United States for president?
That was quite a lot that I was hopeful for, wasn't it?
I love it. You know what? There's no limit. If you have all this hope, fantastic. Amen. We could all use a dose of that amount of hopefulness, because without it, we're kind of doomed. So, well said. That's and it's funny. I do hear the cicadas a little bit now.
It's because the day's starting to heat up. So as the sun comes out, they sing with joy.
They sing with, I'm going to come and invade your house. And that happened once when I lived in the South. They flew inside my house. And as a California girl, I freaked out. I was just like, oh.
They are quite big, and they do have sticky feet. Like if you've ever held one, they do have quite sticky feet.
No, I had one land on me and I was like, that was enough. I was like, I'll take earthquakes. I don't want tornadoes and cicadas. What are you excited about in regards to Big Mouth and moving forward in this new year? What are you looking forward to?
I am really excited about Big Mouth. I'm excited as we can. I'm excited as we continue to grow. I'm excited as I connect with voiceover artists and clients from around the world. But I think the thing that I'm most excited about is not just the value as a business that I can add to everybody when they get a voiceover gig, but also the value that I can add. And I feel like I'm sort of saying the same thing, but it is about the value that I can add as I connect with others and enable them to connect with others. And, that idea of really genuinely encouraging everybody in their voiceover careers and helping them, obviously, with opening up another opportunity for overseas voiceover artists within the Australasian market, but also just that connection that I'm trying to build with everybody. Like I do call us, the Big Mouth Voices family. That is what excites me the most, being another family together of like-minded, lovely individuals who are passionate about voiceover.
And I think the voiceover field has that probably more than, at least I found, more than any other part of the industry, that there's more support and encouragement within voiceover than, say, on-camera work. The voiceover industry as a whole, just very supportive and really willing to help one another. I love the vision that you have for your agency, because at least what I experienced when we were on the Zoom call is what you've already created. So I'd like to say kudos to you that you've already manifested what you have a vision for.
Thank you.
Sarah, if there was a soundtrack to your life, what would be on it?
Okay, well, there would definitely be, in the beginning, some New Zealand music from Flying Nun was a record label that had, you will never ever have heard of these musicians, but it would be like Straight Jacket Fits, the Verlaines. There'd probably be some classic Crowded House on there. There would be a bit of Maria McKee. Breathe probably would be in there. There'd be a bit of Mazzy Star. Then there would be some random songs from like musicals. I loved Chess, so there'd be some songs on there from Chess. I used to create on Spotify my own little list of songs I'd like singing to.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be some like classical music, like I love the old classic Canon in D. So there would definitely be some classical music in there. There'd probably then be some of the piano pieces that I'm trying to learn on the piano. That's another thing that brings me a lot of joy, actually, playing the piano.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I didn't get that in any of the information. I didn't see that you did that. So how lovely.
So that's only just because it hasn't ever come up. But yes, I'm an adult piano student. I'm learning grade 4 at the moment.
We're all students at one level or another. It's okay. It's at least you're learning, right?
Exactly. I do the exams and everything. I love it. And there with all the 8-year-olds.
You remind me of my brother-in-law who went to, after being in Washington for many, many years as an economist, decided to become a lawyer at 60 and was in law school with like 18, 20-year-olds fresh out of high school, going to, with their AA degrees going to study at law school. And he's like, And then he turned into one of the biggest litigators in the country for a while. So, hey, you know what? As long as we're breathing and we have a desire and we're open, I think we're always learning.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish off the question around the soundtrack just quickly, because then I've got another question I'm going to ask myself on your behalf.
Oh, I'll just sit back here and you feel free. Take over.
I was going to say then the next part of the soundtrack would be like the kids' songs. I don't know what their names are, but they play them all the time on Spotify. I'm pretty sure there's one like Monkey something, the Monkey Dance, or the Shark, Baby Shark or something. So
Baby Shark,
not that one. We will never stop singing it.
Shark, make the dinner,
Oh, and then at the very beginning of our lockdown, I did actually play some of the quarantine dance party playlists, and they were so hilarious. But that was 12 months ago. They soon became not hilarious when the reality of it all kicked in. But then the other question I was going to ask myself was, Sarah, if you weren't an actress or a voiceover agent, what career would you aspire to follow? Well,
okay, so hold on. Sarah, if you were not a voiceover actress, agent, entertainment extraordinaire personality, what profession would you choose to be in?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, actually. I would love to train to be a pediatrician.
Really?
Yeah. I call myself mama doctor at home with the children. I'm always Googling medical afflictions, and I own a blood pressure pump and a oximeter or an oximeter to measure oxygen levels and heart rates. I'm very interested in things medical.
So I understand the blood pressure cuff. We have one here. The oxygenator, isn't that when you do that through blood, or is that just with the one you put on your finger to test your oxygen level?
Yes. It actually came about because Amelie has quite bad asthma. So as a 3 and 4-year-old, she'd quite often end up in hospital having asthma attacks, which were very scary. But through monitoring at home with the little oximeter that you put on the finger, I've been able to better now monitor her oxygen levels, and we get like a child dose of steroid that we can give to her at the beginning of an asthma attack, which allows us to keep her out of hospital.
Well, I would imagine that's really tough where you live because you have so much flora and fauna, and I would imagine pollen and the humidity. Is the climate extra tough on her?
It can be. For her, it was more triggered by colds. So in winter, if she got a cold, it would often then end up being an asthma attack. But she does seem to be growing out of it, and she has a regular nasal spray that she takes that keeps the sneezing at bay, like the allergy sneezing at bay. But Auckland is particularly bad, yes, for asthmatics and allergy sufferers.
Not with Mama Doctor. You're going to make sure you're Mama Bear around her and take care of her. She's fortunate to have you. I don't know. I think you're going to move to Patty and become a doctor in your older age. And
I do. I have quite, like you were talking about your brother, like studying law at a later age. There have been moments when I'm like, oh, should I go to university and study medicine? But then what would I do with big mouth voices? And I have to say, I love big mouth voices. So I think everyone's safe with me staying at the helm of big mouth voices for quite some time.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I don't know if it's morbid curiosity, but I think of New Zealand and I think of Australia and I think of ginormous spiders and all kinds of creatures that we don't have where I live in Northern California. So if there was a poster of watch out for this in New Zealand, and this wasn't a planned question, but it just dawned on me, given where you describe where you live and the cicadas and the humidity, what is there that maybe someone coming from the United States visiting New Zealand would be probably a little intimidated by in regards to an insect or a snake or...
You're making New Zealand out to be a dangerous place. I think probably there's hardly anything here. We have no snakes. The cicadas are cute. When you look at them closely, they got nothing. They don't have anything on them that's going to sting you or bite you. I feel like New Zealand's one of the safest places in the world in regards to our flora and fauna and species. If you want to Google something really scary, I guess you could look up, the Avondale spider, which
Oh, I think I've seen it. They have that in Australia.
has long legs.
Really long.
It's not as big as that. I don't think it's as big as the Hunterway. I think the Hunterway spider is the equivalent in Australia. We have some big spiders. We have some big snails in the bush, and we have beautiful geckos.
Oh, geckos are cool. They're totally cool.
Yeah, geckos are cool. Whitetail spiders, I guess, is the one thing we have in the home that we, squash if we see it. And that's, I don't know, like maybe...
Wait. White-tailed spider? What is that?
So it is about 1.5 centimeters long to 2 centimeters long at their full grown size. And they just have a little white spot on the end of the tail. And they can bite you and you can get a welt. So you tend to like whack them with a slipper if you see them. But having said that, in my whole life, I've actually never known anyone who's actually been bitten by a white-tailed spider. So maybe it's a bit of a myth.
Well, this tourist promotional spot has been brought to you by...
Don't be scared of Flora. Don't be scared of our animals.
No. It is every place has its. I've heard, friends who have come back from Australia and they're like, there's spiders that can carry you off in your sleep. And I'm like, no, thank you. I mean, it wouldn't stop me from visiting, but at the same time, it's good to be aware. And then there's other people who are like, I won't come to California because you have earthquakes. And I'm like, well, it's not like we're rocking and rolling every day. So
I don't think our spiders are as big as those in Australia. And we definitely don't have snakes.
Okay, well, another reason to visit, another reason which we will all, I think once your borders are open, I wouldn't be surprised if you have a flood of people moving there, a mass exodus because of how you've handled everything. And I just thank you for this time, Sarah McLeod with 1C. This has been delightful getting to know you a little bit more. And is there anything else you'd like to share before we say goodbye?
No, I have thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you, Cheryl. I'm glad we were able to finally make it happen. And yeah, I just love sharing the joy with everybody who's listening. So thank you, everybody also who is listening.
I'd like to thank Sarah McLeod once again for joining me here on this week's episode of 19 Stories, for being a wonderful guest and new friend down under. If you'd like to contact Sarah, all of her information is included in the show notes at 19stories.libsyn.com. I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips in so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic: BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the Group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Thank you again for joining me today. Feel free to offer feedback or a story idea at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com. Visit my website at soundsatchelstudios.com, via Instagram at CherylHollingVO. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories From Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.